What can ordinary Mississippi citizens do to save millions of lives? Everything. Find out how and why it's important with Ann Reed and her special guest.
Thank you for joining us today. I want to introduce you to our guest, Les and Christy Riley, and their beautiful daughter, Annie. I'm really excited about this interview. Les and Christy together are actually the founders of the Personhood Mississippi Amendment. So what I want to start out with is this is something that I've known you now, I guess, for about 2 years, and it's something that I've always been really curious about myself. I'd like you to just tell us what events led you up to the point of sponsoring Amendment number 26.
Wow, we've only got 15 minutes. I guess what really got us, I mean, I guess you have to go back to about early 90s. We were living in South Haven, Mississippi, and my family had always been involved in politics. And when I became a Christian, I was really disgusted with the whole thing, and we just didn't spend a whole lot of time on that. And
with what?
With politics,
okay.
with all the dirty dealings and stuff. I'm sorry. And then we found out that they opened an abortion clinic about 5 miles maybe from our house. And actually Christy first, and then later I started going down there and sidewalk counseling and trying to reach out to the moms. And we were with a group that helped start a Save a Life chapter in South Haven and did a lot of stuff like that. And people started encouraging me, you need to get back involved in politics. You've got family connections. And so I ran for office in the early 90s. And then through the years, I started studying the Constitution, started studying politics, and really how the Bible applied, how it fit, how we Christians should behave in the political realm. And the first thing that I think you would have to say is that we fail when we don't apply our principles to the political realm when we try to be pragmatic. And then as I studied the Constitution and I started talking to some people who really understood it, they were telling me that Roe versus Wade, it's real clear here. Blackman says we're not going to answer the question of whether or not the fetus is a person, because if the fetus could be defined as a person, they already have rights under the Constitution, and the case for legal abortion crumbles. And so for about 10 years after that, I began trying to find a sitting politician or someone who would run for office and publicly declare the personhood of the unborn and make that the fight. And also the fact that it's time for the states to reassert themselves again under the Constitution. And we could never find anybody to do that. And so in 2004, I contacted Steve Crampton, and I said, well, our Constitution can be amended through initiative and referendum. Why don't we just define... Can
you tell us who Steve Crampton is?
Oh, he's an attorney with Liberty Counsel.
Okay.
Used to be with AFA here in Tupelo, and we went to church together and just got to be friends. And he said, that's an intriguing idea. So we wrote language, and we got to researching and doing stuff like that. And that's what led to the Personhood Amendment. So.
Okay. And how were you, the two of you, involved? Did you get involved in the sidewalk counseling, or?
It was you first.
Yes. In, I suppose, 1991, I had grown up in the church, and, of course, my parents, I grew up in a Christian home, and my parents took me to church every Sunday, and I was there. And so in 1991, I was a young mother expecting my third child. Went to church because it was what I was brought up to do and what I was supposed to do, but the Lord had not touched my heart at that point. And Ellen, our third child, was born, and it was a very traumatic birth, and she was actually born dead. She had to be resuscitated and put on life support and transported to the med where they could deal with her because she was critically ill. And while I was, it sounds strange, I suppose, but I just felt like while I was laying on the operating table and first realized that my baby had been born dead, my first thought was to panic, and then I just felt an overwhelming peace flood my heart that I cannot, and I doubt I will ever be able to explain, but it was just the presence of the Lord just touching me and making real everything I had ever heard and been taught. And so right then and there, you know, I gave my life and my children to the Lord, and I just knew that if this was who God is, and this was His plan for us, then it would be okay. And so, you know, I woke up post-surgery, and Les and the doctor were standing there over me looking very sad, and I said, "It's okay, I know, she's dead." And the doctor went on to explain to us that they had been able to resuscitate her and what all was going to happen. Well, so we fast forward, and after a little while, you know, of just spending more time with the Lord and getting to know Him and all His beauty, it just got to think of what He had given us back in Ellen. And that was about the same time we heard about. We heard about the clinic there, and so we contacted some people who were involved there and just started going and being there for prayer support at first, and then eventually, you know, the Lord brings people across your path and puts you in situations, and you don't really have time to think and plan ahead of time, this is what I'm going to do and say. So it wasn't something we planned on or something we did. It was just a journey that the Lord brought us on. And
here you are.
Here we are.
Well, I just want to share something with you from my own perspective. Like I said, I've known you for a couple of years now. And of course, I'm a woman who has had an abortion. And one of the things that we want to do in this series of videos is we want to break down the walls that are separating, especially believers, that keep us from speaking about abortion and, you know, the sanctity of life and those things. And honestly, I'm just going to be real honest with you. When I first learned of you, and I think we got hooked up on Facebook and things, I was watching you like a hawk. Because of where I come from, there was a wall. You know, I was looking for your heart. I was looking to see, okay, what is this person's motive? You know, when they go to do, women who have had abortions, we're usually real weird about the whole sidewalk counseling thing. And I know that the Lord is leading me there. I'm going to get there myself one day, probably real soon. But because you keep asking me to go. But as I watched you, and I watched the things that you did and the things that you said, the things, and I remember one particular time, I think it was you, Christy, who shared the story of something that happened as you were doing sidewalk counseling. And just the way that you expressed what happened, and when I saw your heart. And I don't know if you remember this, but I saw in that, like, because I used to think, well, that's not the way to do it. You know, we need to be doing this. We need to be working in the crisis pregnancy center. We need to be doing that on the front end. And I think that's what really messes us up, because we try to pigeonhole and find this one way to address this, you know, because based on whatever our experiences are. And when I saw that, and I saw your heart in the matter, and one of the things that I remember you saying, I don't remember exactly what your words were, but the point came across that this isn't about us. This isn't about us going and doing something and being heroes, you know, that you brought across the point that this is God, and we're just being obedient. And I saw your heart, and I saw the heart of compassion and love, and I've continued to see that in your lives.
Well, I think and you really hit on something there, and I'm glad you brought that up. You know, we've adopted, and you know, the Lord has brought us on an interesting journey. One of the really kind things He's done for us, we've got some pretty strong theological convictions on certain, you know, on just about everything, but God has let us be friends and really close to all kind of believers from all kind of different theological bents and stuff. I'm not talking about quote unquote. I'm talking about people who love Jesus and who've been transformed by Him. And the thing that's fascinating about meeting that variety of people is we all want to, even once we've been brought into God's family and adopted by Him and should have every reason to be humble and grateful, we always want to puff ourselves up. And so we become, I'm a sidewalk counselor, or I started a crisis pregnancy center, or I'm pro-life, and so, or I homeschool, or whatever. And so Paul said, I preach Christ and Him crucified. Amen. And I didn't want to know anything else. And that's always been kind of a rock. And when we adopted Josiah, we started noticing the same thing in evangelical adoption culture. Christy saw somebody on Facebook posted one day. She said, I'm unfriending so-and-so. I still like her, but I can't read her Facebook because every time she gets on there, she says stuff like, well, if those pro-lifers really cared about babies, they'd adopt. And that's, that's the way we do things. But the thing we've got to understand, it's like in Nehemiah's time. Nehemiah is a book that begins with Nehemiah being brokenhearted about what was happening to God's people and to God's temple. And the reason was he knew that when God's people, God's city was a reproach, God's name was a reproach. And so it broke his heart. He cried out for deliverance. He reminded God of His character and His promises. He said, God, deliver us. And then he said, use me. I was the king's cupbearer. And you think, well, a cupbearer, how much can he do? But God heard his prayer. God answered him more than he ever would have hoped. And then the rest of the book of Nehemiah is some of the most boring reading in the whole Bible. Because it's, Shishu did this, and Elihu repaired the fish gate, but what that's a picture of is that God works with a bunch of nobodies, just obeying Him and doing the one little thing that's right in front of Him. And you can see it in the, I was actually thinking this morning as I was praying about the way, our first relationship is vertical, but if you in creation, in God's commandments, in the two great commands, in the work of Christ, in the church, what you see over and over again is our vertical relationship with God always translates into this. But in light of what you're saying, what's really neat, Jesus said, all authority in heaven and earth have been given to me. Therefore, go into all the world, preach the gospel, make disciples of nations, teach them to obey everything I've commanded you. Well, what does that have to do with this? Well, it's got everything to do with this because God didn't give me all authority. He didn't give me all ability. He gave me one little set of gifts. He gave me one sphere of influence. But that's not disconnected from the rest of the covenant family of God. And so, I think it's really important that we support those who are promoting adoption. Not, that doesn't mean we all have to do it. We support somebody who goes to Africa to preach the gospel. That doesn't mean I have to do it. And I support people who start crisis pregnancy centers. I support sidewalk counselors. I even support pro-lifers who do things that I go, because, if their motivation is love God with all my heart, and the second, like unto it, love my neighbors as myself, then how can we be anything but just grateful that God brings all these diverse gifts into the fight for life or anything else?
I thank you for the role that you're playing in that, and you're spurring so many on. I mean, you've been a part of opening my eyes, and helping me to see that. Otherwise, if I hadn't come into contact with you, my eyes may not have been open to that. I might still be in this safe box over here, but God never wants to leave us in a safe box.
Yeah, the great thing is that, out there, Christy and I used to have this line, we'd meet people, and one of the great side benefits of being adopted by Christ and being his siblings is other Christians out there aren't any strangers. There's family members that we've not yet met, and there's Christians that you meet that you don't think you needed to know, and your life would be incomplete without it.
Our time is up, but we're going to have another segment after this one.
You ran on too long.
Christy ran on too long, but we'll have another segment following up after this one, and so I'm looking forward to continuing on with our conversation. Thank you so much.